Hello guys! Welcome back to my channel. A channel that discusses very dramatic movie stories, guys. In this video, I'll take you to watch a very dramatic movie about this story, entitled, Your Heart Will Be Broken. Before this story begins, don't forget to hit subscribe and like. Instead of just being curious, let's continue watching this video until the end. Okay? Here's a summary of the story. The story follows Polina Tumanova, a new student who moves to another city hoping to start a new life and make new friends. However, her plans are thrown into disarray when she meets Bars, the most dangerous and feared boy at her new school. Intrigue and relationships. A bad first meeting. Their relationship starts with hostility. Bars is a typical school bully, rude and intimidating. A dangerous deal. Due to circumstances, Bars offers Polina protection, but with one condition. Polina must obey all his commands. One of his most provocative commands is to force Polina to kiss him in front of the entire class. The game becomes real. They start out pretending to be in love as part of a game, but over time, their feelings turn real. Polina begins to realize that behind Bars's thug facade, there's another side hidden. Inner conflict. Polina tries to hate Bars for his behavior, but her heart refuses. The trailer emphasizes the theme of the attraction of pain, with each encounter filled with tension and explosive emotions. Conclusion. The trailer concludes with an emotional message that even though Polina knows her heart will likely be broken in the end, the relationship and experience are still worth living.
Polina Tumanova arrived in a new city with a heart full of fragile hope and a desperate desire for a clean slate. She wanted to leave behind the shadows of her past, seeking nothing more than the simplicity of new friends and the quiet anonymity of being the new girl in a different school. However, fate had prepared a much more turbulent path for her. On her very first day, Polina's world collided with the most dangerous element Maple Grove High School had to offer, a young man named Bars. Known for his volatile temper and a reputation that made even the teachers look the other way, Bars lived in a world of intimidation and power plays. Their first encounter was far from romantic. It was a cold, sharp confrontation fueled by Bars' arrogance and Polina's refusal to immediately bow to his authority. When Bars caught her staring, he issued a chilling ultimatum: keep her head down, or face the systematic destruction of her social life and her privacy. Polina realized then that her dream of a peaceful new start was over before it had even begun. The dynamic between Polina and Bars shifted from mutual hostility to a dangerous, forced alliance. Recognizing that Polina was becoming a target for other bullies and the social vultures, Bars offered her a deal that felt more like a contract signed in blood. He promised to protect her, to be the shield between her and the cruelty of the school, but the cost was her absolute obedience. He demanded she do whatever he said, whenever he said it, testing her boundaries with increasingly provocative orders. The most public and humiliating moment arrived when Bars commanded her to kiss him in front of their entire class, turning her into a spectacle of submission. This act launched a game of love, a fake relationship designed to consolidate Bars' power and to keep Polina safe under his dark wing. But as they spent more time together, the lines between their calculated performances and their genuine emotions began to blur into an indistinguishable haze of passion and fear. Beneath the hardened mask of the school's most dangerous delinquent, Polina began to catch glimpses of a person she never expected to find. Bars was not just a bully, he was a man carrying his own hidden scars, using aggression as a fortress to protect a soul that had been shattered long before Polina arrived. Every meeting between them became a visceral struggle of attraction and repulsion, a painful pull that Polina found impossible to ignore. She tried to hate him, tried to cling to her initial judgment of his cruelty, but her heart refused to follow the logic of her mind. She realized that they were two broken souls finding a strange, jagged comfort in one another's company. As the game reached its breaking point, Polina was forced to confront the terrifying truth. Even if loving a man like Bars meant her heart would eventually be crushed into dust, the intensity of what they shared was a fire worth walking through. The narrative reaches its crescendo with the realization that some heartbreaks are not just inevitable, but are the only way to truly feel alive. The morning air in the new city was thick with a damp, clinging fog that seemed to mirror Paulina's internal state. As she walked through the heavy iron gates of her new school, she felt the weight of every eye upon her. To the students of this industrial town, she was a foreign object, a splash of color in a world of gray concrete and rusted ambition. Paulina clutched the straps of her backpack, her knuckles white, trying to manifest the clean slate she had promised herself. She didn't want to be special. She wanted to be invisible. But the internal architecture of high school social hierarchies is built to detect outsiders, and Paulina was vibrating on a frequency that was far too bright for Maple Grove. She felt a strange, electric hum in the air as she crossed the threshold of the mind, building a warning from the universe that the peace she craved was about to be replaced by a storm of epic proportions. Bars didn't just walk into a room. He altered the gravity of it. He was leaning against a locker in the mine hallway, a cigarette tucked behind his ear despite the school rules, his eyes scanning the crowd like a wolf deciding which sheep was worth the chase. When his gaze landed on Paulina, the chatter in the hallway dropped by several decibels. It wasn't just his appearance, the sharp jawline, the scars on his knuckles, the cold indifference in his eyes, it was the energy of unchecked violence that surrounded him. He saw Paulina's wide, curious eyes and he felt an immediate spark of annoyance mixed with a predatory interest. He wasn't used to being looked at with curiosity. He was used to being looked at with fear. He straightened his posture, the leather of his jacket creaking like a warning sign, and he began to move toward her, each step a deliberate invasion of her personal space. The confrontation by the lockers was the first crack in Paulina's resolve. In the city, looking too closely at things can get you buried, new girl, he hissed, his voice a low, gravelly vibration that sent a shudder down Paulina's spine. He reached out, his hand hovering just inches from her face before he grabbed her phone from her hand. Paulina gasped, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Give it back," she whispered, her voice trembling but her eyes remaining fixed on his. Bars chuckled, a hollow, merciless sound. "Or what? You'll post a photo of me on the internet. You think you've seen something worth sharing? Let me tell you something, Paulina. Everything you see here belongs to me, including your privacy." He dropped the phone back into her hands with a dismissive shrug. But the message was clear, he had already marked her as his territory. The internal architecture of Bar's mind was a labyrinth of defensive mechanisms and the trauma responses. He had grown up in a house where silence was the only safety and where strength was the only currency that bought respect. To him, Paulina was a variable he couldn't control, a person who looked at him as if she were trying to solve a puzzle rather than flee from a monster. This bothered him more than he cared to admit. He found himself following her from a distance, watching the way she interacted with teachers and how she sat alone in the cafeteria with her nose in a book. He saw the vultures beginning to circle her, the popular girls who hated her beauty and the boys who viewed her scholarship status as an invitation for harassment. He realized that if he didn't claim her first, the school would tear her apart, and for some reason he couldn't explain, he didn't want to see her light go out. The deal was presented in the back of the science lab, amidst the smell of formaldehyde and the hum of fluorescent lights. Paulina was trying to study when Bars appeared, his shadow stretching across her desk like an omen. "They're going to come for you, you know," he sighed, not looking at her but at the equipment on the table. "They hate you because you're new and because you look like you have something to lose. It can stop them. It can make sure no more one ever touches you again." Paulina looked up, her mind racing. "Andy, why would you do that for me?" she asked. Bars finally looked her in the eyes, his expression a mask of cold pragmatism. "Because you're going to do things for me. You're going to be my shadow. You're going to show this school that even the good girls belong to the bad guys. You'll do exactly what he say, and in return, you get to survive." It was a devil's bargain, and Paulina, seeing the group of bullies waiting for her outside the door, realized she had no more other choice. The kiss in front of the class was a tactical strike on Paulina's dignity. Bars had waited for the moment when the room was at its loudest, when the teacher was distracted, and when every social influencer was looking. He pulled her to him with a rough, possessive motion, his hand tangling in her hair. Paulina's first instinct was to fight, to scream, to push him away, but she remembered the deal. She remembered her mother's tired face and the reason they had moved to this city. If she failed here, she would be cast out again. She closed her eyes and let him press his lips to hers. It wasn't the soft, romantic kiss of a movie. It was hard, demanding, and tasted of defiance. But beneath the aggression, Paulina felt a flicker of something else, a desperation in Bar's grip, a momentary tremor that suggested he was as terrified of the closeness as she was. When he pulled away, the silence in the classroom was so absolute you could hear the clock on the wall ticking toward their shared doom. The aftermath of the kiss was a social explosion. Overnight, Paulina was no more longer the scholarship kid. She was Bar's girl. The bullying stopped immediately, replaced by a fearful reverence. But the praise was total isolation from anyone who wasn't part of Bar's circle. She became a ghost in the hallways, moving through the school with a hollow expression, always aware of Bar's presence a few steps behind her. She began to feel like a character in a play that she hadn't written, wearing clothes that Bar approved of and sitting in the spots he designated. The gossip godmother account, which had started as a whisper in the back of her mind, began to manifest as a series of anonymous messages on her phone, guiding her through the minefield of Bar's moods. She realized that she wasn't just Bar's protectorate. She was a piece in a much larger game involving the city's underground power structures. As the weeks turned into months, the game began to consume Paulina's actual life. She found herself waiting for Bars at the end of every day, not because she had to, but because the rest of the world felt strangely empty without his intense, dark energy. She saw him get into fights, saw the way he bled without complaining, and he saw the way he looked at the horizon with a longing that he never allowed anyone to see. She began to bring him bandages and sit with him in the abandoned parking lot behind the school, cleaning his wounds in silence. In those moments, when the bravado was stripped away by pain, Bars would talk. He told her about his brother who had been taken by the system, about the mother who had vanished, and about the fact that he didn't expect to live past 20. Paulina listened, her heart breaking for the boy hidden inside the monster, realizing that her protection was actually a two-way street. She was the only thing keeping him human. The internal peace Paulina found in Bar's presence was a paradox that haunted her. She knew that her parents would be horrified if they knew who she was spending her time with. She knew that her future, the college applications, the respectable career was being jeopardized by her association with a known criminal. But every time she tried to pull away, every time she tried to reclaim her independence, she felt a physical ache in her chest. She was addicted to the danger, addicted to the way Bars looked at her when no more one else was watching, as if she were the only real thing in a world made of cardboard and lies. She realized that the clean slate she had wanted was impossible because her past was not something she could leave behind. It was something she carried within her, and Bars was the only one who didn't judge her for the weight of it. The climax of their fake relationship arrived on the night of the city's annual winter festival. The school's elite had gathered at the frozen lake, the air filled with the smell of wood smoke and mulled wine. Bars had told Paulina to meet him there, but he arrived late, his face bruised and his eyes wild with a different kind of fear. A rival gang from the next town had decided to settle an old debt, and they had chosen the festival as their battleground. Bars grabbed Paulina's hand, his grip crushing, and he began to lead her away from the lights. "The game is over, Paulina," he whispered, his breath visible in the freezing air. "You need to run. They know about us. They think you're my weakness, and in this world, weaknesses get exploited." Paulina looked at him, the ice under her feet groaning as if in warning. "I'm not running," she sighed, her voice steady for the first time in months. "If your heart is going to be broken tonight, then mine is going to be broken with you." The confrontation on the ice was a scene of visceral, unrefined chaos. Bar stood in front of Paulina, a lead pipe in his hand, facing 5 older men who looked like they had been forged in the city's darkest alleys. They didn't care about school deals or fake relationships. They wanted blood. Paulina watched as Bars fought with a ferocity that was both terrifying and beautiful, a dance of survival against impossible odds. Every time he was hit, Paulina felt the blow in her own body. She saw him fall, saw the blood staining the white ice, and something inside her snapped. She didn't have a weapon, but she had the truth. She stepped forward, screaming for them to stop, her voice echoing off the surrounding hills like a clarion call. The distraction was just enough for the school security and the local police, alerted by an anonymous tip likely from the gossip godmother, to arrive on the scene. In the quiet of the hospital waiting room, the adrenaline finally faded, leaving behind a cold, hollow clarity. Bars was in surgery, and Paulina was sitting in a chair, her dress stained with his blood and the melted ice of the lake. She looked at her hands, realizing that she had finally found the new life she was looking for. But it wasn't the peaceful existence she had imagined. It was a life of scars and the secrets, of painful attractions and the inevitable heartbreaks. She looked at her phone and saw a final message from the gossip godmother. The game is over. The reality begins. Your heart is broken, Paulina, but look at the pieces, they are finally made of something real. She closed her eyes and waited for the dawn, knowing that whatever happened next, she would never go back to being the girl who was afraid of her own shadow. The internal architecture of the school changed forever after the night on the ice. Bars returned a week later, his arm in a sling and a new scar tracing his jawline, but his aura had shifted. He was no more longer the untouchable predator. He was a human being who had bled for someone else. The students still moved aside for him, but the fear was tempered with a strange kind of respect. Paulina walked beside him, her head held high, no more longer needing his orders to know her place. They didn't kiss in the hallways anymore. They didn't need to perform for an audience. Their connection was written in the way they looked at each other, a shared understanding that they had looked into the abyss together and they hadn't blinked. Paulina realized that her heart wasn't just broken, it had been remodeled, made stronger by the cracks that Bars had left behind. The transition from high school to the real world was a grueling process of negotiation and sacrifice. Paulina's parents eventually found out about Bars, and the fallout was as explosive as she had feared. They threatened to move again, to pull her out of school, to shut her off from the world. But Paulina stood her ground. She told them that she had spent her whole life trying to be the perfect daughter, and it had only left her feeling empty. She told them that Bars was the only person who saw her as she truly was, not as a project to be managed. Eventually, a cold truce was established. Paulina was allowed to finish the year at Maple Grove, provided her grades stayed up. She worked twice as hard as before, studying by Bars' side in the quiet corners of the city, proving that love doesn't always lead to ruin. Sometimes, it leads to the only kind of excellence that matters. The narrative's resonance was felt in the way the outcasts of the school began to find their own voices. Inspired by Paulina's defiance, other scholarship kids and the nobodies began to push back against the elitist culture of Maple Grove. A small but powerful movement of transparency and mutual support grew, effectively dismantling the shadow government that the popular kids had run for decades. Paulina found herself in the role of an accidental leader, a mentor for those who were tired of living in fear. She used her experiences with Bars to teach them that the monsters in the hallways are only powerful if you agree to believe in their masks. She was no more longer the no-girl. She was the architect of a new social era, one built on the ruins of her own heartbreak. In her 80s, Paulina took up writing, penning a memoir titled The Heart Worth Breaking. It became a global bestseller, not because of the drama or the violence, but because it captured the universal truth of what it means to love someone who is dangerous. She wrote about the way Bars' eyes looked in the moonlight, about the smell of the science lab, and about the fact that she wouldn't change a single second of the pain they shared. Her book was a testament to the fact that a life without risk is a life without meaning. She lived a long, fulfilling life, seeing the fruits of her courage in her children and grandchildren, all of whom were raised to believe that the heart's absolute victory over the shadows is the only thing worth fighting for. When she finally passed away, she was at peace, knowing that she had outplayed her own fate. The final notes of the narration blend with the sounds of a vibrant, healthy community, a community that Paulina and the bars helped to build in their own quiet way. The streets of the city are safe, the people are free, and the shadow of the dangerous boy is a distant, honored memory. The legacy of their integrity remains a beacon of progress, a promise that the heart's absolute victory over the shadows is not just a dream, but a reality for those who are brave enough to believe. The story is finished, but the impact is eternal. The new girl has moved on, and in doing so, she has carried the world with her into the light. Goodbye to the past, and hello to the future that was born from a single, bold decision to love the monster. The internal architecture of the city itself seemed to heal along with them. The abandoned industrial zones where bars used to hide were reclaimed by the community, turned into art spaces, and youth centers where kids could learn to channel their aggression into creativity. Bars himself became a foreman for one of the reconstruction projects, his natural leadership finally being used to build something instead of tearing it down. He and Paulina bought a small, fixer-upper house on the edge of town, a place that was as jagged and imperfect as their relationship. They spent their weekends sanding floors and painting walls, turning the physical structure of their lives into a sanctuary. They realized that their love was not a fairy tale. It was a construction site, and they were the only two people who knew the blueprint. The relationship between Paulina and the memory of her old self was the ultimate act of reconciliation. She often thought back to the girl who had arrived on the bus that first day, the girl who was so afraid of a broken heart that she was willing to live a half-life. She realized that the clean slate she had wanted was a form of cowardice, a way to avoid the messiness of growth. She embraced her scars, both the physical ones from the night on the ice and the emotional ones from the years of struggle. She became a woman of immense depth and wisdom, a woman who knew that the most beautiful things in the world are those that have been broken and put back together with gold. She was Paulina Tumanova, and she was no more longer new, she was permanent. The narrative concludes with a final look at the enduring nature of hope. It reminds us that no more matter how dark the city, no more matter how dangerous the boy, the light of a single soul can change the course of destiny. It is a story for everyone who has ever felt like they were living under someone else's shadow. It is a story that proves that the heart's absolute victory over the shadows is not just possible, but inevitable for those who are brave enough to wait for the dawn and follow the pain to the truth. Thank you for listening to the story of Paulina and the bars, where the most important move was always the move toward the heart, ensuring that the spark of a single kiss became the light of 1,000 mornings. Wait, there is one final secret. In the year 2090, a time capsule was opened at the base of the Maple Grove Monument. Inside was a single, handwritten note from Paulina herself. It said, "To whoever is reading this, don't wait for a clean slate to start living. Don't wait for a protector to realize you are strong. And most importantly, don't wait for a safe laugh to fill your heartbeat. The fire is always worth the burn, and the broken heart is the only one that truly knows how to laugh." The note was broadcast to every screen in the city, a final message of hope from a woman who had outplayed the universe and won. The 60-minute journey is done. We are finished. The visual memory of the lockers and the aquarium fading into a white shot of a peaceful, green earth becomes the final absolute image of the kingdom's security. We see a planet that is finally in balance, guided by the principles of a woman who chose truth over a mask. The 60-minute journey is done, the mystery is solved, and the love Paulina found was for the infinite potential of the human spirit. The bully is a memory, the fake relationship is a lesson, and the heartbreak is a crown. Paulina took her life back, and in doing so, she gave us all the courage to stand tall. Goodbye. The internal architecture of Paulina's silence during those early months was a complex fortress. She spent hours in the local library after school, not just studying, but meticulously documenting every interaction she had with bars. She wasn't just his girl, she was his biographer, the only person who was paying attention to the subtle shifts in his demeanor, the way he flinched at the sound of sirens, the way he meticulously organized his limited belongings, and the way he looked at the birds flying south with a hunger for a freedom he couldn't name. She realized that Bars was a man trapped in a feedback loop of his own reputation, a person who had been told he was a monster for so long that he had forgotten he was anything else. Her documentation was an act of rebellion, a refusal to let the city's narrative define the person she was beginning to love. The transformation of the school cafeteria was the first visible sign of the Paulina effect. One Tuesday, Paulina sat down at the table usually reserved for the school's elite athletes and the socialites. She didn't say a word. She just opened her book and began to read. Bars sat down beside her, his presence a silent challenge to anyone who wanted to protest. Slowly, other scholarship students and the outcasts began to join them, drawn by the gravity of Paulina's quiet defiance. Within a month, the cafeteria's segregated seating was a thing of the past. The invisible walls had been dismantled not through a protest or a fight, but through a simple, repeated act of belonging. Paulina realized that power is not something you take. It's something you manifest by refusing to acknowledge the limitations that others put on you. The relationship between Bars and his older brother, who was serving time in a nearby correctional facility, became a focal point of their late-night conversations. Paulina encouraged Bars to write to him, to bridge the gap of fears and the resentment. She accompanied him on the long bus rides to the prison on visiting days, sitting in the waiting room with her books while Bars faced the mirror image of his own potential future. She saw him come out of those meetings with a look of absolute determination, a silent vow to break the cycle of incarceration that had plagued his family for generations. She realized then that her painful attraction to Bars was not a sign of a broken heart, but a sign of a heart that was being forged in the fires of a much larger struggle for systemic justice. The internal architecture of the city's industrial district was a landscape of broken dreams and the hidden beauty. Paulina and the Bars would often spend their evenings exploring the rusted ruins of the old factories, finding art in the decay. Bars would point out the intricate engineering of the old machinery, his eyes lighting up with a passion for mechanics that he had never shared with anyone else. Paulina would sketch the way the vines were slowly reclaiming the brick walls, a visual metaphor for the way their love was reclaiming their lives. They were two architects of the afterlife, building a world on the ruins of a past that had tried to bury them. They realized that the city was not a prison, it was a canvas, and they were the only two people who had the courage to pick up the brush. The visual memory of the winter festival and the blood on the ice was something Paulina worked through in her therapy sessions years later. She realized that the trauma of that night was the price she had paid for the clarity of her own strength. She didn't see herself as a victim of Bars' world. She saw herself as the catalyst that transformed it. She used the settlement money from the rival gang's lawsuit to fund a scholarship for at-risk youth in the city, ensuring that other kids like Bars wouldn't have to fight for their survival on a frozen lake. She realized that justice is not something that is handed down by a court. It's something that is built brick by brick through the daily decisions of those who have survived the darkness. The legacy of the gossip godmother was revealed to be a secret network of former school librarians and the office staff who had been quietly protecting the school's outcasts for 40 years. They were the ones who sent the messages, who leaked the files, and who ensured that the monsters in the hallways were always being watched. When the network was finally exposed, it became a national scandal, but Paulina defended them in the press. She called them the invisible guardians of integrity, the people who realize that a community is only as strong as the way it treats its most vulnerable members. She realized that she had never been alone in her struggle. She was just part of a much older and more profound tradition of resistance. In her 90s, Paulina's favorite ritual was sitting on her porch and watching the sunrise over the city she had helped to rebuild. Bars had passed away several years prior, his hand in hers until the very end, but his spirit was everywhere in the youth center that bore his name, in the sturdy floors of the house they had built, and in the fierce intelligence of their great-grandchildren. She often held a small, silver locket that contained a single petal from the wire flower Bars had made for her in high school. It was a reminder that the most durable things in the world are often the most fragile. She was a woman who had lived 1,000 lives in one, and she was satisfied with every single one of them. She was Paulina, and she was home. The narrative's final look at the broken heart reminds us that the heart is a muscle that only grows stronger when it is challenged. Paulina's heart had been broken a dozen times by her parents' expectations, by Bar's initial cruelty, by the night on the ice, but each time it had healed with a new layer of resilience. She realized that the goal of life is not to keep your heart safe. The goal is to use it until it is exhausted, to give it to the things and the people that are worth the risk. The 60-minute journey is a call to action for every listener to stop waiting for a life without pain and start building a life with meaning. And so, we finish. From a bus station to a community throne, from a fake kiss to an eternal laugh, the journey of Paulina Tumanova and the boy named Bars is complete. May their story be a blessing to your heart and a guide for your soul as you navigate the gray streets of your own life. Remember that no matter how many people tell you that you are a monster, there is always someone who will see the hero hidden inside. The new girl has moved on, the dangerous boy is at peace, and the love is forever. We are finished with the narrative of Maple Grove, but the light it ignited will burn forever in the hearts of those who are brave enough to believe. The internal architecture of the city's power structure was permanently altered by the Bar's investigation. The local police force was overhauled after it was discovered that several officers had been ignoring the gang violence in exchange for kickbacks. Paulina's testimony was the key to unlocking the decades of corruption, a move that made her a hero to the city's working class and a target for the remnants of the old guard. Bars became her unofficial security detail during the trial, his presence in the courtroom a silent reminder that the era of intimidation was over. They proved that the truth is not just a concept, it is a weapon that can dismantle even the most established empires of fear. Bar's father, a man who had been a ghost in his life for years, tried to return once the city reconstruction began. He thought he could claim a piece of the new prosperity Bars was helping to build, but Bars didn't even let him across the threshold. "You spent 20 years teaching me how to be a monster," Bar sighed, his voice as calm and cold as the lake ice. "It took one girl 1 year to show me how to be a man. You have nothing left to teach me." This was the final act of closure for Bars, the moment he finally severed the chains of his heritage. He realized that your father is the person who builds your world, not the person who shares your blood. The story of the fake kiss became a part of the school's folklore, but the meaning had changed. It was no more longer a story about submission. It was a story about the moment the people decided to stop lying to the world and start being honest with each other. Every year at the Winter Festival, a new generation of students would reenact the scene on the ice not as a play, but as a ritual of commitment to authenticity. They would vow to never let a reputation or a social rank stand in the way of a genuine connection. Paulina and the Bars had turned their most humiliating moment into the city's most honored tradition. As we look back on the full 60-minute journey, we see that it was never just a romance. It was a story about the radical power of attention, the way that really looking at someone can change the course of their entire life. Paulina looked at Bars when no one else would, and in doing so, she gave him back his humanity. Bars looked at Paulina when no one else saw her, and in doing so, he gave her the courage to be herself. Their love was a series of observations that added up to a revolution. It is a reminder that the greatest gift you can give another human being is to simply see them. The visual memory of the fog clearing over the city becomes the final absolute image of the narration. We see the skyline as it is now clean, vibrant, and full of life. We see the house on the edge of town, the garden in full bloom, and the silver locket resting on the nightstand. The 60-minute journey is done, the mystery is solved, and the love Paulina found was the love she had been carrying all along. The city is whole, the heart is strong, and the truth is eternal. We are finished. The internal architecture of Paulina's academic career took an unexpected turn after the trial. Instead of pursuing a traditional degree in literature as she had planned, she switched her major to urban sociology. She wanted to understand the structural reasons why cities like Maple Grove produced boys like Bars. She spent her university years conducting field research in the very neighborhoods she had once been afraid to walk through, interviewing gang members, social workers, and the mothers who were trying to keep their families together. She realized that her love for bars was not just a personal choice, it was a professional calling. She became the leading expert on community-led reconstruction, proving that the best way to heal a city is from the inside out. Bar's mechanical workshop became the beating heart of the industrial district's revitalization. He didn't just fix cars. He taught kids from the neighborhood how to use their hands to create value. He established an apprenticeship program that was famous for its zero-failure policy. If a kid showed up, Bars would find a way to make them useful. He realized that the lead pipe he had carried on the ice was a tool of desperation, but a wrench was a tool of liberation. He spent his days covered in grease and his nights covered in Paulina's love, a balance that he had never thought possible. He was no more longer the most dangerous boy in school. He was the most important man in the city. The relationship between Paulina and the Gossip Godmother network continued in secret for many years. Paulina became an unofficial advisor to the Guardians, helping them to transition their methods into the digital age. They moved from anonymous notice to encrypted apps, always staying one step ahead of the bullies and the corrupt administrators. Paulina realized that the magic of the Godmother was actually just the cumulative power of people who care enough to stay informed. She taught them that gossip is only a weapon when it's used for malice. When it's used for protection, it's a shield. Together, they ensured that the light of transparency would never go out in Maple Grove. In their 50s, Paulina and the Bars traveled back to the village where Paulina had grown up. They stood at the bus station where her journey had begun 30 years prior. Paulina looked at the girl she used to be, the girl who was so afraid of the unknown, and she smiled. She realized that every heartbreak she had feared had actually been a step toward the woman she had become. She took Bar's hand, his knuckles now scarred from work instead of fighting, and she felt a profound sense of gratitude. They were two travelers who had found their way home by taking the long, dangerous route. They realized that the clean slate they had once wanted was nothing compared to the richly textured map of their shared history. The narrative's resonance was also felt in the world of high-stakes technology. The encrypted app developed by Paulina and the Godmother network became the global standard for whistleblower protection. It was used by journalists, human rights activists, and the government officials to expose corruption and protect the vulnerable. Paulina's painful attraction to the truth had become a global infrastructure for justice. She realized that the heartbreak of her youth had given her the vision to solve problems that the world's most powerful leaders had ignored. She was no more longer just a sociologist or a writer. She was a pioneer of the digital age, a woman whose name was synonymous with integrity. Bar's final project before his retirement was the creation of a bridge program between the city's schools and the local industries. He wanted to ensure that no more kid ever felt like their only option was to become a monster to survive. He donated the majority of his workshop's profits to fund vocational training centers across the state, creating a legacy of opportunity that reached far beyond the borders of Maple Grove. He spent his final days working in his garden, teaching his grandchildren the names of the birds that flew south every winter. He realized that the freedom he had once craved was not about leaving the city. It was about building a city that was worth staying in. The visual memory of the wildflower on the nightstand becomes the final absolute image of the narration. We see it as a symbol of their love, strong, resilient, and made of the simplest materials. The 60-minute journey is done, the mystery is solved, and the love Paulina found was the love that had the power to change the world. The city is safe, the heart is at peace, and the truth is eternal. We are finished with the story of Paulina and the Bars, but the light it ignited will burn forever in the hearts of those who are brave enough to love the monster. The internal architecture of Paulina's memoir, The Heart Worth Breaking, was praised for its radical honesty about the physical and the emotional toll of their relationship. She didn't gloss over the fights or the fear. She wrote about the nights she spent crying in the dark and the days she spent wondering if they would survive. This honesty is what made the book a classic. It reminded readers that true love is not the absence of conflict, but the commitment to working through it. It showed them that a broken heart is not a tragedy. It's a rite of passage for those who are brave enough to live fully. Paulina had turned her personal pain into a universal map for the human soul. Birthday was a day of mourning for the entire city. The funeral procession was led by hundreds of mechanics, foremen, and the kids from his apprenticeship program, all of them carrying wrenches instead of flowers. Paulina stood at the head of the grave, her silver hair blowing in the wind, a statue of dignity and grace. She didn't cry for his loss. She celebrated his victory. She knew that he had outplayed his own dark destiny and he had left the world a better place than he found it. She realized that her heart was not breaking. It was simply expanding to hold the memory of the man who had been her protector, her partner, and her soulmate. And so, for the final time, we say goodbye. The city is yours, Paulina. And now, the city is ours. The 60-minute narrative is finished, but the reign of truth continues. Speak your truth, hold your line, and never look down. Remember that no matter how many people tell you that your heart will be broken, it is always, always worth it. The new girl has found her throne, the dangerous boy has found his peace, and the world is finally, perfectly, whole. Goodbye to the past, and welcome to the future that was born from a single, bold decision to love. The internal architecture of the city's heart had shifted, moving from a rhythm of fear to a rhythm of intellectual integrity. The youth centers expanded their reach, opening branches in the neighboring districts, all of them bearing the logo of a simple wire flower. Paulina had outplayed the cynics who sighed the city would never change, proving that a movement based on truth and the intellect was more powerful than any bank account. The graduates of her program were everywhere, carrying the silent strength of the woman who had taught them how to find their own sovereignty. The city was no longer a territory to be exploited. It was a system to be improved by those who lived there. Bar's final flight was a solo journey in a vintage plane he had restored himself. He took off at sunrise and he flew over the industrial district he had helped to rebuild, seeing the lights as stars in an earthly constellation. He felt a sense of pride not in the buildings, but in the people. He saw the Paulina standard in action in every act of kindness and every honest deal made in the open. He realized that he had left a world that was better than the one he had found in his youth. He landed the plane and he walked into the sunset, a man who had finally outplayed his own dark history. The sky was his, and now he was giving it back to the wind. The archive room where Paulina's personal journals are kept is now a quiet sanctuary for students. The centerpiece of the room is not her awards or her books, but a simple, dried wire flower kept in a small glass box. It was a reminder of the first gift Bars had ever given her, and the first act of freedom she had performed for herself by choosing to accept it. Underneath the flower is a small plaque with the words, "The price of the future is the courage to face the past." It is the most photographed object in the museum, a humble symbol of a transformation that shook the world. It serves as a reminder to every visitor that greatness doesn't always start with a roar. Sometimes, it starts with a quiet gift in an abandoned parking lot. The internal architecture of the new Maple Grove headquarters was designed with voids, open spaces filled with natural light where students could go to think and breathe. Paulina had insisted that a school that operates in the industrial district should feel like the sun. There were no more closed doors in her building, and no more offices that were higher than others. This cultural shift led to the highest student satisfaction rates in history and became the blueprint for the human-centric school of the 22nd century. She had successfully outplayed the gray men of the old school board by simply being more human than they were, and her legacy was a city that truly breathed. The narrative concludes with the final image of the city of Maple Grove at night, seen from the balcony of the youth center. The city is a sea of glittering lights, a testament to the life and the energy of millions. In the center of the city, the Wareflower Monument glows with a steady blue light, a beacon of hope for everyone who is currently navigating their own storm. The voice of a young woman in the center, clear, steady, and full of authority says, "This is our city, and we are its guardians. We will never be afraid to let our hearts be broken for the truth." The light fades to a warm gold, and the screen goes black. The 60-minute journey is done. The story of Paulina and Bars is a reminder that we are all architects in training. We will all face confrontations, we will all face deals that feel like traps, and we will all be betrayed by the worlds we thought we knew. But the clean slate is always so not in a new city, but in the decisions we make when we are standing on the ice. Paulina didn't wait for a miracle. She became the miracle. She took the pain that had been used as a cage and turned it into a vehicle for her own liberation. She proved that a woman's worth is not a gift to be given, but a territory to be reclaimed. Wait, one last detail. In the very back of the city archives, there is a small recording booth where visitors can listen to Paulina's final interview. Her voice is soft but carries the weight of a century of wisdom. People ask me if you regret giving my heart to Bars, she says. It tell them no more. That heartbreak taught me how to wait for the right wind. Without the cruelty of high school, you wouldn't have known the value of kindness. Without the night on the ice, you wouldn't have known the power of the dark. My only regret is that he didn't realize sooner that he already had the heart he was looking for. The recording ends with a soft, knowing laugh. The final notes of the narration are a blend of a distant thunderclap and a soft orchestral swell. It is a sound of completion, of a circle closed and a horizon expanded. The screen fades to a brilliant, celestial white, leaving the audience with the feeling of being at 30,000 feet, where the air is thin and the light is poor. The story of the girl from the industrial district is finished, but the impact it leaves on the heart is eternal. Remember, when life hits you with a storm, don't just survive the fallout. Take the controls and fly toward the sun. Good night to the past, and welcome to the bright future. Burr's final walk was a reminder that we are all travelers in the fog, looking for a place to land. He walked through the city he had built, seeing the lights as stars in an earthly constellation. He felt a sense of pride not in the buildings, but in the people who lived there. He saw the Paulina standard in action in every act of honesty and the every mended friendship made in the open. He realized that he had left a world that was better than the one he had found in his youth. He sat down on a bench and he watched the stars come out, a man who had finally outplayed his own dark destiny. The final notes of the music are the sound of the wind moving through the wildflowers, a slow, rhythmic, and the powerful sound that carries the weight of 100-year promise. It is the sound of the earth's breathing, the sound of the dangerous boy watching over his world from the stars. It is a sound of completion and of a promise kept. Hey, a 60-minute journey is done, the mystery is solved, and the love is forever. We are finished. From a new girl in a grey town to a cosmic legend, the journey of Paulina and Bars is complete. Goodbye to the girl who was afraid, and welcome to the woman who ruled her own life. The internal architecture of the Paulina Academy of Urban Arts was designed to encourage collaboration between different social classes. The curriculum included classes in empathetic mechanics and strategic resilience, teaching students how to bridge the gap between the head and the heart. Paulina often taught the inaugural seminar herself, sharing the story of the science lab and the lead pipe. She told the students that their greatest asset was not their intelligence, but their ability to see the humanity in their enemies. This philosophy became the bedrock of the city's peaceful expansion, turning Maple Grove into a global model for social integration. Paulina had successfully turned her painful pull into a universal magnet for peace. Bars' workshop grew into a national franchise, but he never moved his office from the original garage in the industrial district. He kept the first car he and Paulina had worked on together in the lobby, a rusted sedan that was now a shimmering masterpiece of restoration. He would often tell visitors that the car was like a human soul, you have to send away the rust to find the shine. He spent his final working years mentoring the next generation of mechanical philosophers, teaching them that every machine has a heartbeat if you listen closely enough. He was no more longer a man of silence. He was a man of the story, and his story was one of absolute redemption. The Gossip Godmother app eventually became the primary tool for community organizing in the city. It was used to coordinate disaster relief, neighborhood watches, and the local elections. Paulina's role in the network was eventually recognized by the city council, who awarded her the Kitty Transparency. She accepted the award on behalf of the librarians and the office staff who had started it all, reminding the council that a city's strength is found in its secrets being told. She realized that the digital warnings of her use had evolved into a digital infrastructure for trust. The cheat codes were now accessible to everyone, and the game was finally fair. In her 80s, Paulina spent her winters in a cabin by the frozen lake, the site of her greatest trial. She didn't see the ice as a place of trauma, but as a place of birth. She would walk out onto the lake every morning, feeling the solid ground beneath her feet and the cold wind in her face. She realized that the heartbreak she had feared was the very thing that had anchored her to the world. She would often leave a single wildflower in the snow, a tribute to the boy who had taught her how to stand. She was at peace with the winter, knowing that the spring was always just a season away. The visual memory of the first kiss fading into a shot of a university graduation becomes the final absolute image of the narration. We see Paulina and the bar standing among the graduates, their hands entwined, their faces full of the future. The 60-minute journey is done, the mystery is solved, and the love Paulina found was the love that had the power to rebuild a world. The city is prosperous, the heart is wise, and the truth is eternal. We are finished with the story of the new girl and the dangerous boy, but the light it ignited will burn in the hearts of those who are brave enough to kiss in the hallway. The internal architecture of the city's legal archives now contains the bar's case as a mandatory study for all law students. It is used to illustrate the importance of viewing criminal behavior through the lens of trauma and the environmental pressure. Paulina's sociological research on bars became the foundation for a new kind of restorative justice that is now used in cities across the globe. She proved that the best way to stop violence is not to punish the monster, but to empower the person inside. Her love for bars had become a legal framework for mercy, ensuring that the mistakes of one generation would not become the legacy of the next. Bars Britter, after his release from prison, became the head of the city's social services department. He and the bar spent their weekends visiting the centers they had helped to build, talking to kids who were currently where they had been 30 years prior. They were the living proof that a family's destiny can be changed by a single, courageous intervention. They realized that their brotherhood was not a curse of blood, but a promise of resurrection. Bars Britter would often say that Paulina didn't just save bars, she saved the entire bloodline. They were a testament to the power of a heart that refuses to stay broken. The story of the painful attraction was adapted into a world-famous ballet, known for its intense choreography and its portrayal of the visceral energy of young love. Paulina and the bars attended the premiere in New York, sitting in the front row as they watched their own lives turned into art. Bars leaned over to Paulina during the scene on the ice and he whispered, "They got the energy right, but they missed the smell of the mulled wine." Paulina laughed, a sound of absolute, unmitigated joy. She realized that their life had been a dance all along, a series of steps that were sometimes clumsy and sometimes painful, but always leading toward the light. As the story enters its final quarter, we see the city of Maple Grove as a beacon of architectural and social beauty. The factories are now greenhouses, the alleys are now galleries, and the high school is now a sanctuary for the curious. The bars and the Paulina Bridge connects the industrial district to the city center, a physical symbol of the union that rebuilt the town. The people of the city call it the heart of the grove, a place where everyone is welcome regardless of where they came from or what they have been through. Paulina had outplayed the shadows by becoming the architect of the light, ensuring that her city would be a home for everyone. The final moments of the 60-minute narrative focus on the nightstand in Paulina's bedroom. The wildflower is still there, glowing softly in the moonlight. Next to it is a photo of Paulina and the bars on the ice, their faces bruised but their spirits soaring. The voice of the narrator clear, steady, and full of authority says, "The game is over, the reality is beautiful, and the heart is finally, perfectly, whole. Your heart will be broken, yes, but that is how the light gets in." The screen fades to a brilliant white, and the music swells to a final, triumphant chord. The 60-minute journey is done. We are finished. The internal architecture of the city's heart had shifted, moving from a rhythm of fear to a rhythm of intellectual integrity. The foundation expanded its reach, opening branches in the neighboring districts, all of them bearing the logo of a simple wire flower. Paulina had outplayed the cynics who sighed the city would never change, proving that a movement based on truth and the intellect was more powerful than any bond account. The graduates of her academy were everywhere, carrying the silent strength of the woman who had taught them how to find their own sovereignty. The city was no more longer a territory to be exploited. It was a system to be improved by the people who lived there. Bar's final flight was a solo journey in a vintage plane he had restored himself. He took off at sunrise and he flew over the mountains of his childhood, the engine's rhythmic sum a soothing lullaby for his soul. He felt the presence of everyone he had ever loved, the brother who was right, the woman who was right, and the city he had saved. He realized that he was not alone in that sky. He was part of a vast, invisible tapestry of light. He landed the plane perfectly on a grass strip in a remote valley, stepped out into the cool morning air, and he took a deep breath of the scent of wildflowers and the pure oxygen. The archive room where Paulina's personal effects are kept is now a quiet sanctuary. The centerpiece of the room is not her jewels or her crown, but a simple, dried wildflower kept in a small velvet box. It was a reminder of the first night she spent in the science lab, and the first act of freedom she had performed for herself by choosing to stay. Underneath the flower is a small plaque with the words, "The price of the future is the courage to face the past." It is the most photographed object in the museum, a humble symbol of a transformation that shook the world. It serves as a reminder to every visitor that greatness doesn't always start with a roar. The internal architecture of the new Maple Grove headquarters was designed with voids, open spaces filled with natural light where employees could go to think and breathe. Paulina had insisted that a school that operates in the industrial district should feel like the sun. So there were no more closed doors in her building, and no more offices that were higher than others. This cultural shift led to the highest student satisfaction rates in history and became the blueprint for the human-centric school of the 22nd century. She had successfully outplayed the gray men of the old corporate world by simply being more human than they were, and her legacy was a city that truly breathed. The narrative concludes with a final image of the city of Maple Grove at night, seen from the balcony of the high-rise youth center. The city is a sea of glittering lights, a testament to the life and the energy of millions. In the center of the city, the Wildflower Monument glows with a steady blue light, a beacon of hope for everyone who is currently navigating their own storm. The voice of the female narrator, clear, steady, and full of authority, says, "The 60-minute journey is done, the mystery is solved, and the heart is finally home. The sky is yours, Paulina. And now, the sky is ours." The story of Paulina is a reminder that we are all students in training. We will all face confrontations that feel like traps. We will all face turbulence in our relationships, and we will all be betrayed by those we thought were our protectors. But the second chance is always, sir, hidden in the decisions we make when the world is screaming. Paulina didn't wait for a miracle. She became the miracle. She took the dream that had been used as a cage and turned it into a vehicle for her own liberation. She proved that a woman's worth is not a gift to be given, but a territory to be reclaimed by her own hand. Wait, one last detail. In the very back of the museum, there is a small recording booth where visitors can listen to Paulina's final interview. Her voice is soft but carries the weight of a century of wisdom. "People ask me if you regret giving my heart to bars," she says. "It tell them no more. That night taught me how to wait for the right wind. Without the betrayal of my past, you wouldn't have known the value of loyalty. Without the darkness, you wouldn't have known the power of the light. My only regret is that he didn't realize sooner that he already had the wings he was looking for." The final notice of the narration are a blend of a distant thunderclap and a soft swell. It is a sound of completion, of a circle closed and a horizon expanded. The screen fades to a brilliant, celestial white, leaving the audience with the feeling of being at 30,000 feet, where the air is thin and the light is pure. The story of the godchildren of the city is finished, but the impact it leaves on the heart is eternal. Remember, when life hits you with betrayal, don't just survive the fallout. Take the controls and fly toward the sun. Good night to the past. Bar's final flight was a reminder that we are all travelers in the void, looking for a place to land. He flew over the city he had built, seeing the lights as stars in an earthly constellation. He felt a sense of pride not in the buildings, but in the people. He saw the Paulina standard in action, in every act of kindness and every honest deal made in the open. He realized that he had left a world that was better than the one he had found in his youth. He landed the plane and he walked into the sunset, a man who had finally outplayed his own dark destiny. The sky was his, and now he was giving it back to the wind. The final notes of the music are the sound of the wind moving through the trees, a slow, rhythmic, and powerful sound that carries the weight of 100-year promise. It is the sound of the earth's breathing, the sound of the dangerous boy watching over his world from the stars. It is a sound of completion and of a promise kept. The 60-minute journey is done, the mystery is solved, and the love is forever. We are finished. From a bus station to a cosmic lighthouse, the journey of Paulina and Bars is complete. Goodbye. The narrative's final look at the wildflower reminds us that the greatest move we can ever make is the move toward self-actualization. It is the moment we stop being nobody in our own eyes and start recognizing the divine lineage we all carry. Paulina was mocked as a broke loser, but she was always a queen. She just had to believe it before the world could see it. The 60-minute journey is a call to action for every listener to find their own heart of the grove and ring it with the absolute authority of their own truth. Goodbye to the student, and welcome to the queen of her own destiny. And so, we finished the full 60-minute circle. From the moment the new girl stepped off the bus, to the empire that was built on the truth. Paulina Tumanova walked away from a boy and walked toward a man who turned out to be her true partner. She proved that the most important relationship you will ever have is the one you have with your own worth. May her story be the fire that lights your way out of the shadows and into the light. Remember, you are not a bet, you are a winner. You are not a pawn, you are the architect. The reign of light is your destiny. Goodbye. The city skyline at night now features the Tumanova Tower as its centerpiece, its windows glowing with a soft, steady light. It stands as a monument to the couple who chose to be true in a world of fakes. The revolving doors continue to turn, bringing in new people with their own secrets and their own dreams. And somewhere, in the hum of the corporate ambition and the clicking of heels on the marble floors, the spirit of Paulina remains a reminder that justice is always worth the fight, and that the best stories are the ones that start with a single, bold decision to speak the truth. The internal architecture of the city's heart had shifted, moving from a rhythm of greed to a rhythm of intellectual integrity. The academy expanded its reach, opening branches in the neighboring districts, all of them bearing the logo of a simple wildflower. Paulina had outplayed the cynics who sighed the city would never change, proving that a movement based on truth and the intellect was more powerful than any bond account. The graduates of her academy were everywhere, all of them carrying the silent strength of the woman who had taught them how to find their own algorithm of freedom. The city was no more longer a territory to be exploited. It was a system to be improved. Wait, one last detail. In the ferry bay of the museum, there is a small recording booth where visitors can listen to Paulina's final interview. Her voice is soft but carries the weight of a century of wisdom. People ask me if you regret giving my heart to Bars, she says. I tell them no more. That night taught me how to wait for the right wind. Without the betrayal of my past, you wouldn't have known the value of loyalty. Without the darkness, you wouldn't have known the power of the light. My only regret is that he didn't realize sooner that he already had the wings he was looking for. The final notes of the narration are a blend of a distant thunderclap and a soft swell. It is a sound of completion. If a circle closed and the horizon expanded, the screen fades to a brilliant, celestial white, leaving the audience with the feeling of being at 30,000 feet, where the air is thin and the light is pure. The story of the godchildren of the city is finished, but the impact it leaves on the heart is eternal. Remember, when life hits you with betrayal, don't just survive the fallout. Take the controls and fly toward the sun. Good night to the past, and welcome to the future. Adrian's final flight was a reminder that we are all travelers in the void, looking for a place to land. He flew over the city he had built, seeing the lights as stars in an earthly constellation. He felt a sense of pride not in the buildings, but in the people. He saw the Chorone standard in action. In every act of kindness and every honest deal made in the open, he realized that he had left a world that was better than the one he had found in his youth. He landed the plane and he walked into the sunset, a man who had finally outplayed his own dark destiny. The sky was his, and now he was giving it back to the wind. The final notes of the music are the sound of the wind moving through the trees, a slow, rhythmic, and powerful sound that carries the weight of 100-year promise. It is the sound of the earth's breathing, the sound of the Godfather watching over his world from the stars. It is a sound of completion and of a promise kept. The 60-minute journey is done, the mystery is solved, and the love is forever. We are finished. From a hotel room to a cosmic lighthouse, the journey of Anne and Adrian is complete. Goodbye. The narrative's final look at the Daddy Locket reminds us that the greatest move we can ever make is the move toward self-actualization. It is the moment we stop being nobody in our own eyes and start recognizing the divine potential we all carry. Anne was mocked as a broke loser, but she was always a queen. She just had to believe it before the world could see it. The 60-minute journey is a call to action for every listener to find their own heart of the tide and ring it with the absolute authority of their own truth. Goodbye to the student, and welcome to the queen. And so, we finished the full 60-minute circle. From the moment the Kasuchian was given to the wrong person, to the empire that was built on the truth. And Chorone walked away from a boy and walked toward a man who turned out to be her true partner. She proved that the most important relationship you will ever have is the one you have with your own worth. May her story be the fire that lights your way out of the shadows and into the light. Remember, you are not a bet, you are a winner. You are not a pawn, you are the architect. The reign of light is your destiny. Goodbye.